Welcome to the Lessons for Luca Podcast. I'm your host, Michael De Santi, author of New Man Emerging, transformational coach, and most importantly, I'm Luca's dad. The themes and philosophies around this podcast, as I've mentioned before, is two very simple things. What does it mean to be a good man? And what does it mean to live a good life? And this is all about that exploration, all about that discovery, and passing it on to my son as he grows into a man. And today's topic is really my favorite topic. What does it mean to live a good life? You know, so much of this is not only my personal philosophy, but merged and melded into my coaching philosophy, and it's really the whole system around which I build my life and build my practice, both personally and professionally. So really, really happy to be here with you on this conversation. What does it mean to live a good life? And I'm sure I feel at the heart of all of us, that's a commonality. You know, that contemplation, that exploration, that wonder, that question. You know, what does this mean to live a good life? What is my life and the impact of my life and my existence? How do I define that as being successful and living a good life? So the first I want to highlight is really the way that we're conditioned or sold or seduced into what a good life is. And I think so much of our conditioning is to really develop a belief system around that a good life is one of status, of accomplishment, of possessions, and all of what I call that fall under the umbrella of what I call peak experiences. But I want to poke some holes in that philosophy because at the end of the day, the math just doesn't really add up. So I think that what we are sold and conditioned, that a good life is as many peak experiences as close together as possible. But if we look at it from a certain angle, that means, let's say you're fortunate enough to live until you're 80 or 90 years old. And let's say you're fortunate enough to have 1,000 peak experiences in life. That still means that the majority of your life takes place in the mundane, that the majority of your life takes place in the everyday. And so if I come from this belief system that a good life is as many peak experiences as close together as possible, even if I have 1,000 peak experiences in life, I'm falling way short of the majority of my life. And when we operate from that place, those peak experiences, no matter how great they are, no matter how exceptional they are, they're always fleeting. They never last for a long time. They throw us back into, okay, well, what's tomorrow like? What's the everyday like? What's the mundane like? And so when we come from this place of getting as many peak experiences as close together as possible, we tend to live our life as though our peak experiences are an escape from the mundane. And unconsciously, that creates a lot of behaviors that are actually unhealthy, self-sabotaging, and they actually throw a lot of wrenches in the mix of generating a quality, successful, consistent, and committed life forward. And so now the angle that I want to present is that if the majority of my life is in the mundane, that means that mastery is in the mundane. The majority of our marriages is in the mundane. The majority of our health is in the mundane. The majority of our prosperity, our career, the impact that we're making on our lives and the nucleus of our lives and the community near us, that all takes place in the mundane. And so when we live from a place of mastery and self-mastery is in the mundane, well, then now those peak experiences become an enhancement of the mundane, rather than an escape from the mundane. And living in that place of self-mastery of what can I advance today in my life? What could I add as an advancement to my health, to my marriage, to my prosperity, to my spiritual life, my leisure life, my relationships? Now we create a whole new angle of what it means to live a good life and to master the mundane and to really break life down into those moments that When we are so peak experience driven, we will overlook the exceptionalness that's actually in our sphere on a daily basis. The wonder that's just in our backyards, the wonder that's in our homes and in our marriages. We'll overlook it. We'll see through it. We'll want to think that this isn't enough, but the next moment will be. And when we reframe that, we start to see the magic that's in front of us on a mundane level, on an everyday level, on a micro level. And when we start to develop a new relationship with that, that creates a whole new definition of what it means to live a good life. And so now the angle I want to present is what a good life really is, and really putting that energy into developing and building and cultivating a good life. It still comes down to my basic philosophy. And remember, my basic philosophy is simple. Build character, strengthen relationships. At the heart of who we are, that solves 99% of our troubles. That every moment, whether it's in the mundane or in a peak experience, is the opportunity to build and grow my character, or it's the opportunity to nurture and strengthen relationships and connection. And so now, how do we make our life the arena in which we are practicing that level of self-mastery? And this comes down to a simple philosophy that I have, a simple approach and a simple way that I coach is living a good life requires that we confront the 4 inevitabilities of life. And the reason I say that there are 4 inevitabilities of life is because they are baked in ingredients in our lives, in the universe, in the cosmos, whatever it is. They are ingredients that are inevitably baked into our existence, and they're unavoidable. And those 4 inevitabilities are pain, loss, uncertainty, and adversity. They are ingredients that are built into our existence. They're unavoidable. They are inescapable. No matter what your status in life, no matter what your accomplishment in life, no one is exempt from these 4 inevitable ingredients in life: pain, loss, uncertainty, and adversity. No one's exempt from them. I don't care whatever your status, high or low, is. Inevitably, we are all going to face these 4 ingredients, these 4 inevitabilities in our life. Some of us to a high degree, some of us to a low degree. Some of us have faced the majority of ours in our past, and some of us may be facing the majority of those in our future. Either way, no one's exempt. And so if we look at the way we frame this is now, we are actually saying that storms in life are inevitable. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We are all inevitably going to face pain. We are all inevitably going to face loss. We are all inevitably going to face uncertainty, and we're all inevitably going to face adversity. Pain, like the Buddha said, that life is suffering. I would adjust that and say life has suffering components in it. Suffering is inevitable. No matter who we are, we're going to face disappointment. We're going to face rejection. We're going to face heartbreak. We're going to face trying, making effort, and failing. And that all fits under that umbrella of pain. We're all going to face it. Like I said, some in a big degree, some in a small degree, some historically, and some of it, pain is waiting in our future. But no matter who we are, we will always face the possibility of failure, of falling short, of having our heart broken, of being disappointment, being let down. That's an inevitability. And what we are looking at is we're saying that this is built in. It's built in. It's an inevitable ingredient. Loss, we are all going to lose people that we love. People are going to come and go into our lives temporarily or permanently. The people that we love, inevitably one day, they're going to pass on. They're going to pass away. They're going to get sick. They're going to, restructure our relationships. We'll lose them. They'll move away. They'll pass away. We are going to face the things that we love, the people that we love. One day, they won't be here anymore. Loss is an inevitability. The third is uncertainty. I don't care whatever level of status and wealth that you've built, no one can predict the future. No one can predict when they are going to pass away. No one controls their destiny to a point where it's infallible and they have all the answers. We are constantly faced with a level of uncertainty. No matter how much control we think we have in our lives, think we have on the earth or in the universe, we are constantly faced with a level of uncertainty. There's no way around it. None of us can predict what's going to happen tomorrow. None of us could even predict what is going to happen this evening. In us, uncertainty is baked into the framework of how we live. And finally, the fourth inevitability is adversity. There is no way that we develop our life, grow and mature without facing something to overcome, some level of adversity, of some level of being blindsided, some level of having to overcome something that forces and requires us to grow into a new, greater, better version of who we are. We are all going to face adversity. We are all going to face adversity in our health, in our growth, in our personal growth journey, in our career, in our marriages. There's always going to be some level of a friction point that is going to leave us with a choice to either step up or retreat into comfort. That's going to have us either step up into commitment, into courage, or have us retreat into familiarity, into our comfort zones, or into what we think is emotional safety. We are all going to face these adversities. We are all going to, any level of growth or any level of maturity is going to require that we face adversity, that we face inadequacy, that we face a level of falling short in something that we deem is important to us, that we're going to get blindsided, that there's going to be things that we didn't predict that are going to show up and get into our way and obstruct our path, and we got to face it. Now, my argument is that part of our conditioning, like I said before, that a good life and what we're sold and what we're conditioned as a good life is status and possessions and accomplishments. And I also think that we're conditioned to think that a good life is one that is free or exempt or at least low of pain and loss and uncertainty and adversity. That a good life somehow is free of those four inevitabilities. And my angle and my argument and my approach is actually trying to avoid those four inevitabilities actually creates anxiety. It actually creates a sense of feeling lost, a sense of feeling alone, a sense of perfectionism, that I can't make any mistakes, that it's wrong to feel lost or scrambled up because I don't have the answers. I don't know, why do I feel this pain? Why do I feel this sense of loss? Why do I feel unsure and uncertain? And maybe that I framed it that feeling adversity or coming up against adversity or feeling stunted, as maybe I'm doing something wrong. We have been conditioned that a good life is to avoid these four inevitabilities. And that if you could avoid these four inevitabilities, you're going to have a great life. You're going to coast, and life is going to be easy and fun and exciting. And I'm actually framing it and arguing it the opposite way. That a good life is not one that is exempt from pain and loss and adversity and uncertainty, but a good life is actually accepting that life is inevitably filled with pain and with loss and with adversity and with uncertainty. That these are inevitable ingredients in life. And the moment I accept that those are inevitable ingredients in life, I could face reality and I could build a new skill set. I could master a new skill set. I could master the mundane. I could build skill sets and growth sets and mindsets and teams and partnerships where we don't avoid or attempt to avoid pain and loss and uncertainty and adversity, but we actually not only accept that these are inevitable ingredients in life, but I also welcome them. I welcome that pain and loss and adversity and uncertainty are ingredients in life, because the moment that I welcome them, I could face them with full resource. I could face them with full agency in life. That facing and welcoming pain and loss and uncertainty and adversity doesn't create anxiety in my life. Welcoming those four inevitabilities actually creates empowerment in my life. Because when I open myself up to pain and welcoming and accepting that pain is part of life, that it's inevitable, that means I open up the door to wisdom, to knowledge, to growth. That when I accept and welcome that there's pain in life, I could reframe my relationship with failure. I could reframe my relationship with disappointment and with heartbreak. I could open up myself to greater wisdom, greater insight, greater knowledge. When we ask anyone who we consider successful, look back on your life and tell me, where did you build the most amount of character and wisdom and humility? Inevitably, that person won't share with you their triumphs. They'll share with you their low points. They'll share with you the wisdom that they gained in their darker moments. They'll share with us the things that they thought, this was the end. This is where I was most desperate, most desolate, most heartbroken. But I overcame it. I faced it. And in that facing of it, in that welcoming of it, I gained a new wisdom. I gained a new insight. I gained new clarity. When we welcome ourselves, or we welcome life to pain, we open up a greater sense of wisdom. When we open ourselves and we accept and we welcome loss, we could love more deeply. That we could open up our hearts, that we could open up ourselves, knowing that someday I won't have what I have right now. When we open ourselves up to loss, we could love more deeply and be more present in the moment. Knowing and facing the reality that one day I won't have the people that I love here with me, that has me reframe the way I interact with them now. It has me love them more deeply, forgive more quickly. It has me be more present to the moment and say, I understand that this is impermanent. I understand that this is not going to last forever. I understand that one day my son isn't going to be as small as he is and ask me to stop what I'm doing and sit down with him and read him a book. I know that those moments are fleeting. It's inevitable. It's inevitable that through his growth and through my growth with my wife, that all of that's going to change. And some of the things that we do now and we love now, some of those things are fleeting. That one day, that my parents, my father's already passed, but one day, like the older generation in my life and in my family, they're not going to be here. One day, years in the future, God willing, that the people that I love will pass on. And I know that's inevitable. But rather than run from that reality, rather than avoid that reality, rather than hope that reality were different, I accept it, I welcome it, and I face it. And when we open ourselves up to loss, when we accept and welcome loss, we could love more deeply. When we accept that uncertainty and welcome that uncertainty is an inevitable ingredient and factor in life, it opens our hearts up to trust and to faith. It opens our hearts up and our minds up that in the future, I step into my future. I step into my life. I step into the unknown with a level of confidence in myself, a level of trust in myself, a level of trust in my life, trust in my abilities, faith in who I am, faith in the universe, faith in my higher power, however you relate to that. None of that happens when everything is laid out with a level of certainty. None of that happens when you know all the answers that are coming. None of that happens when the uncertainty is taken away from us or robbed from us. The way you watch a game not knowing who wins is actually what builds the excitement into the game. When you know the outcome, you rob yourself of the excitement. We rob ourselves of the joy of becoming. We rob ourselves of the trust and the faith and the commitment of stepping into the unknown, because that uncertainty is actually what breeds the excitement of our life. And if we develop or try to avoid uncertainty, we never really know what we're made of. We never really know what trusting ourselves and empowering ourselves and developing confidence, we never really know what that looks like, because we want all the answers. We want things to be certain. If all of our life was certain and laid out, we would die of boredom. We would die of lack of excitement. That uncertainty, that not knowing, that unknown, when we build a sense of empowerment and confidence and trust and faith in who we are, that opens up a whole new excitement for our future. It doesn't create anxiety. It creates empowerment and excitement and a restlessness that pulls us into another greater version of who we are. And the fourth inevitability is the inevitability of adversity. So many times we think and we're framed and conditioned that we want to eliminate adversity from our life. But when we accept that adversity is an inevitable ingredient in life, when we welcome it, we start to really understand what we're made of. All of us at the heart of who we are root for the underdog, and we root for the breakthrough of overcoming a triumph, or overcoming a struggle into triumph. It's built into the DNA of human beings that we are biologically conditioned to overcome hard things and then release all kinds of neurotransmitter, of serotonin, of dopamine, oxytocin, and all of these things, that all of these feel-good emotions that come from overcoming adversity. It's an inevitability of life. But when we try to avoid that and build a life around comfort and build a life around avoiding adversity, we're always left with the regret or with the void of not knowing what it is that I'm made of. That in that moment and opportunity, when I was faced with adversity, I had the choice to choose commitment and courage and trusting myself and building confidence and stepping into that next greater version of who I am, or I chose to default into comfort. I chose to default into familiarity. I chose to default into safety. I chose to default into fear. And if we don't meet that adversity, if we don't overcome that adversity, if we don't build a skill set to handle adversity, then we're doing ourselves a massive disservice. Because in that adversity, again, that's where we grow our character. In that adversity, we build a skill set. In that adversity, we reach out to the people that have overcome what we seek to overcome, and we build greater bonds. We build greater connections. We start to understand what we're made of. We start to understand that there's a greater version of us waiting at the other end of taking that committed action, taking those risks into a commitment that we say is important to us, something that we claim to love and value, that's worth reshaping and reframing and redesigning who we are, because it exists in an unknown future, because it exists with overcoming an adversity, because it exists from loving so deeply that I risk loss. It comes from inevitably knowing that as I face my inadequacies, as I step forward, that I'm going to fail, that I'm going to experience pain and suffering, that I'm going to hit walls that make me, or at least suggest to me, quitting is the better option. But when I start to reframe, living a good life is not avoiding these four inevitabilities, but living a good life is accepting that they are part of my future, that they're part of my life, and not only accepting them, but welcoming them. Well, now I could turn and face them with full agency, with full power, with full responsibility. And we could do that void of perfection. We could do that void of never making mistakes and needing to have all the answers. We do that with full agency and full capacity, all while knowing I'm going to fail. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to meet blind spots that I never saw coming. The things along the way that I love and people along the way that I love, I will lose them. But I could face that. And in facing that, I build an emotional skill set. I build a mental skill set. I build physical skill sets in my life and in my community that become so valuable, they become recession proof. And living that good life means that every day I have that commitment to self-mastery, that I master the skill sets, not to avoid pain, but to welcome it. Not to avoid loss, but to welcome it. Not to avoid adversity, but to welcome it. And not to avoid uncertainty, but to step into it and welcome it. That's a whole different skill set that we build mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And there are so many factors in those four domains, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, that we could start to reframe the way that we shape our lives, reframe the way that those four inevitabilities are baked into our life. We have the option to fall victim to those inevitabilities. We have the option to frame them as injustices. We have the option to say, if I could design the universe, I would have done it better. And I would have eliminated those four things. I would have eliminated those four inevitabilities in life. That is your right. But I guarantee you and promise you that that would be a dramatic misuse of your time, love, and energy. But what we can do is we could accept that these are inevitable ingredients baked into our lives. And so I want to reframe the way that we interact with these four inevitabilities. That when we open ourselves up to pain, we open ourselves up to a greater wisdom. That when we open ourselves up and accept and welcome loss, that we could love more deeply ourselves and each other. That when we accept and welcome that life is filled with uncertainty, that we could access a greater sense of faith and a greater sense of trust and confidence in ourselves. And when we open ourselves up and accept and welcome that there's adversity, we welcome an opportunity, a part of us that overcomes, a part of us that triumphs through challenge. And so that to me is living a good life. That to me is a noble endeavor. That to me is worth the opportunity and the commitment to self-mastery. And as we do that, and as this becomes our roadmap and our definition of what it means to live a good life, we begin to master that mundane. We begin to interact with our challenges and with our opportunities, our relationships in a whole different way. And it constantly addresses the two core tenets of my own philosophy, personal and coaching: build character, strengthen relationships. That as we interact with pain and loss and uncertainty and adversity, we are building character along the way. That we are creating connections through challenge. We're creating connections through our own humanness. And those are constantly calling us into that next greater version of who we are. There's an old saying, I think it's a saying somewhere in Scandinavia, where triumph and success shared is celebration doubled, and suffering shared is suffering cut in half. And so when we reframe the way we live with pain and loss and uncertainty and adversity, we open ourselves up to greater connection. We open ourselves up to a greater sense of self and a greater community. And that, in the end, to me, that's living a good life. The accomplishments and the status and the peak experiences are just simply demonstrations and representations and enhancements of the opportunity for self-mastery in all of this every day, in the mundane. And so that's the invitation here. That's the exploration that I want to be on with you all, and that's the exploration and discovery that I want to be on with my son, is what does that mean to live a good life? What are the skill sets that I get to build physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally to deal with pain, loss, uncertainty, and adversity with a sense of grace, with a sense of character building, with a sense of openness and honesty and vulnerability? That to me is a noble endeavor. That to me is a triumph worth experiencing. So that's the exploration, and that's the invitation. And that's my definition of what it means to live a good life. So I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for being here. And until we meet again, be a good man, live a good life, and determine each of those for yourself.